knock on wood, escaped it, but
Well, I had a mild case of it about 4 weeks ago, but
huh,
other than that, things are good.
that's good.
I'm gonna
Well-
put my mic on mute for a while until we get started.
Okay. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. And
Sure.
I'm joined here by my colleague Tanvi as well.
Hi, Tanvi. Who's going to do the presentation, you or Tanvi, or both of you? Or
I'll speak briefly at the top and help with Q&A, but Tanvi is our expert engineer, so she'll be given the full construction brief.
okay,
Right, I'll need to screen. I'm on here twice, so without the video is how I'll be sharing.
Okay.
When it's
Tanvi, you're breaking up a little bit. Just a heads up.
all right. Would it be a problem if I turn off the video? Because that might help the voice carry better.
I don't think so.
Okay, so when I'm presenting, I'll turn off the video. That way
Okay,
I don't lose it.
The joys of video conferencing, right?
we'll give it a few more minutes to try to get to a quorum here, though we don't have a vote, so not totally necessary, but give it a couple more minutes.
Sure, we'll have a lot of
Evan,
opportunities to chat together on this topic.
Yes, I'm sure. Evan, thanks for running the tech end of this meeting.
Evan, liked your choice of music in the beginning.
Thank you. Give it till 6:35 and then we can get started. Hi, Karen. All right, let's get things going. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric McClure. I am the chair of Community Board 6 Brooklyn's Transportation Committee. I'm joined by the chair of the Public Safety Committee, Jerry Armour. We are a joint committee, Transportation and Public Safety. We are here tonight to get an update on the status of the Brooklyn Queens Expressway renovation, rehabilitation, reconstruction project. Julie Barrow and Tanvi Pandya are here from DOT to present. I'm going to ask Evan Farley, who's running the technical portion of this meeting, to upgrade the attendees to panelists, so everybody can have a camera on and be seen. During the course of the presentation, I'm going to ask members of Community Board 6 to participate first, but we'll be happy to invite participation from members of the public. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function so I can recognize you. If somebody has asked a question that is very similar to yours, I would ask that you defer it in the interest of time, but we would certainly invite people to participate if you do have questions about the project. And with that said, I am going to turn it over to Julie Barrow from the Department of Transportation.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. And thanks so much to CB6 for having us this evening. We're really excited to be here. As Eric said, my name is Julie Bureau, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer here at the City Department of Transportation. It's actually my third week here at DOT. And I've been brought on to manage the many moving parts of the BQE project among some other priorities. I'm here at DOT after about 7 years in the mayor's office and in the city council, where I worked on many issues, including transportation. And I've lived in CB6 for much of my life, actually. I'm excited to have the opportunity to collaborate with all of you on this project and others, I'm sure, because obviously this one, though, immensely impacts our community. Before we begin the presentation, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the recent press coverage about the future of the BQE and then share some next steps. So as the mayor has said publicly, obviously the BQE, as you all know very well, is a vital part of our transportation system and our economy. And he feels that we can and we must immediately start working with the community on a plan for a safe, modern, and resilient structure that we need. He feels that we cannot wait 2 decades, as had been planned in the previous admin, and unnecessarily spend what would come to hundreds of millions of additional taxpayer dollars. And so that's what, the prior plan would have done, and we really want to take a more bold corridor-wide approach to address the entire structure and reconnect communities that have, we believe, needlessly been divided by this highway. I can assure you the road is safe. We are moving forward with all necessary repairs, as Tanvi will speak about tonight, and the structure is really constantly monitored. I feel we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity here to access federal funding as well, and it will really help us to reimagine and rebuild the BQE for a post-pandemic city and economy. We definitely want to work with you. We're really prioritizing engagement with impacted communities. I want to work with you to identify a vision for the BQE that works for everyone. So to that end, we're going to be kicking off a really thorough public engagement process in the coming weeks. Really looking forward to working with you all on that. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to our engineering team to speak to the topic at hand, which is these immediate 2023 interim repairs. So turn it over to our expert engineers here.
Thanks, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to video as I present just to make sure that my sound comes through. And I apologize for my scratchy throat. I'm a little bit under the weather, but fortunately, no COVID. We've met in the past. We've spoken several times about BQE in various forums. I think I feel like I've seen some of you in the past. So we're happy to restart the conversation. Like Julie said, for today, we're focusing on the immediate term work, specifically around this triple cantilever area. And while we've had a little bit of time that we haven't talked actively about the larger project, we have not been sitting back. Obviously, we've been keeping safety in mind. We've been monitoring the structure. We have quality walkthroughs that are done by our consulting team and including our in-house teams to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on the structure. When we identify any area that needs further investigation, then we have follow-up effort that continues. We also have monitors that we've installed on the structure. And then on top of that, we have the WIM, which is the weigh in motion technology that was installed in 2019, which tells us exactly the kinds of loads that are on the structure. So we take the data points, right? So on one side, we have the condition of the structure and what it's able to carry. And on the other side, we have just how much weight do we have. And the combination of the two is what we look at to figure out the timeline for various repair work in the near term, and then setting the timeline for the longer term. So we've also been partnered with C2 Smart, which is their academic.
Tanvi, you're breaking up a little bit again.
I can try coming back if you don't mind.
Sure, why don't you do that?
Okay.
Sorry about this, folks. We'll be hopefully back online in a second.
It looks like she's connecting.
Thanks so much, everyone, for your patience.
And Julie, in case Tanvi continues to have problems, is there somebody else on the team who can walk us through the presentation?
I believe we can probably cover most of it. Sally is on the line from Tanvi's team and can definitely help us out talking through some of it. So we'll make the best of it and obviously follow up if it's not working. Apologies for the tech difficulties here. Tanvi, do we have you back?
Let's give her another minute, but then we might ask one of you guys to jump in.
Yeah, it looks like she's joining by
She's
phone.
joining by phone.
If she can only do audio, I can share my screen and she can walk us through it.
She's on the attendees, so she can't speak. If we can make her a panelist.
I upgraded her to talking should be permitted if I think she's just muted now. If it's the 347 number.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tanvi, you're connected but muted on the phone.
How
There
about
we go.
now? Hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, great.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Tanvi, would
Back
it
to the
be,
regularly scheduled program.
Tanvi, if we
No,
have an
this is fine.
issue? Okay, great.
No, it's sorted out. Okay.
Thanks everyone for your patience. Appreciate it.
Right. So we were talking about the truck monitoring that we've been doing. We'll talk, you've heard that we got the legislation approved, and we'll be looking to do automated enforcement in early 2023. In the meantime, we're doing the analysis and modeling that tells us where the structure is today and where it'll be down the line. And we're partnered with the academic institutions of Rutgers and NYU, who are helping us think these things through and using some cutting edge tools to do that. So what we've done is, back in 2016, when we spoke about the condition of the structure, we had said, if by 2026, nothing is done, we would have to consider weight restrictions. What we did is we tried to identify what are the locations that are causing that 2026 timeline to come up, right? So just like any chain is only as strong as the weakest link, we've now identified the two weakest links, and we're looking to address those two. So that's at near Clark Street on Queensbound Roadway, the deck there, and then at Grace Court, also on the Queensbound Roadway. So those are the two deck sections that we need to do some work on. In addition, underneath when you're driving along Furman, there's that vent structure for MTA that goes underneath BQE, and it has an area inside the BQE that we have some repairs to be done. Since that area is only accessible from the Queensbound roadway, while we have that roadway closed for other repairs, we're going to take that opportunity to address that interior condition. And lastly, inside Geralman, where those roll doors are, back in there, there's a structure that we would like to address as well. So all of this work is going to come out as a combined contract later this year. So just looking at it from another direction, again, nothing to do with the promenade, it's purely on the Queensbound roadway. And at the rough cross street would be Clark and Grace. In terms of the area inside that I was referring to, it's a little bit hard to visualize, but this area on the top right-hand side, that sandwich between the Queensbound and Staten Island bound roadway behind this wall is where we need to do the work. And these conditions that you see on the bottom two photographs, those are the conditions that we're trying to address. So to get to this section behind the wall, you come down from the Queensbound roadway. So that's the work that will be ongoing while the other repairs also happen. This is something that we have to work with MTA on. It has no impact on subway service or any of that. It's simply that we're in the vicinity of their equipment, so we have to coordinate with them and make sure that we do it in a way that doesn't disrupt anything. And then this Geralman work, and the reason I'm focusing on these two tasks is sort of, we're going to dig deeper into the deck repairs. I just want to get these two out of the way because they're relatively straightforward as far as the community. Like this work will be interior to this chamber that you see. So there won't be too much visible outside, and it doesn't require any closures on the roadway. So it's just work that needs to happen. It'll be happening inside that structure. There's some, this structure that has a crack we would like to repair. There's some other beams that need to be repaired. And so that's sort of happening in the background. The more important work that will be more visible and requires more of the traffic management is what's happening at the Queensbound roadway. Directly adjacent to the joints is where you can see it visually as you're driving by, where there's so much more deteriorated concrete, right? So before we can do the repairs, we have to remove a lot of the concrete that's directly adjacent to the joint. So roughly 2 feet from the joint, there will be a lot heavier repair that we have to do. So we would remove this deteriorated concrete and then place some new rebars to add strength to the area and then place new concrete. So that's the directly next to the joint kind of repair. And then as we go a little bit further in from the joints, that's where the repair gets a little bit shallower. So we remove the upper level of the concrete, replace it, add some rebar there as well to add to the capacity, and then pour concrete. So, and as you might recall from the past conversations, we need to work across all 3 lanes for this repair to really work. So that's why when we come back to put this concrete back in is where we are going to be looking for some closures. I'll walk through the closures a little bit more in detail, but while that work up above is happening on the deck, there will be work inside in this red area and the yellow column that you see on the right. So the way the work is staged, there is a lot of prep work that needs to occur. So there is the demolition of the concrete that has to happen. This will occur during the overnight hours, just like we do now, you know, roughly from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., everything is back open. So there will be overnight closures where work will occur. Plates will be put over the area that's under construction, and then, you know, come back the following night and do it again, kind of thing. When there is work underneath this, you know, cantilever portion, just to be safe and not put any traffic underneath live construction, we would likely close this lane as well. But it would be 1 lane in each direction at most during those overnight hours. The rest of the day, everything is back to the usual configuration. So after prep is complete, there will come a weekend where we will now be ready to put new concrete back. And that's when the first weekend closure will be necessary. So this closure would be Saturday morning, 2 a.m. to Monday morning, 4 a.m. And this is to allow us to place this concrete. When the concrete is wet, it needs to be sort of held up by support system, which would be sitting underneath it on the Staten Island bound roadway, which is why we're down to 1 lane in Staten Island bound direction, all lanes closed on Queens bound roadway. And then once the concrete has cured to a sufficient degree that we can remove this support structure, we will remove it. Staten Island bound roadway would then be open, and Queens bound roadway just needs to have sufficient concrete cure time for the repair to hold. So this is the window that we will be allowing the contractor to work in. Obviously, we will be encouraging them to finish quicker and get out, but this is the window by permit that they will be allowed. So after the work nearest to the joint is completed, for the subsequent 2 weekends, there would be just that prep. Then there will be another weekend where we do a pour, again, some more prep, and then the last weekend where we do a pour. So those subsequent 2 weekends, we would only have Queens-bound roadway closure. Staten Island-bound would be completely open. So these weekends are spread out over the construction season. We're, you know, very carefully trying to find the 3 weekends where there isn't any other major activity happening. There's no major holidays, no planned events, and so on. So it's being very carefully thought through on how to do it to, you know, not have issues regionally, because, you know, anything that happens to BQE does have a tendency to impact the regional traffic, as well as obviously the local traffic is greatly impacted. So this is sort of the summary of the kinds of closures we're talking about. So there's prep initially, first weekend closure, prep some more, second and third weekend similarly. In order to achieve this, obviously we have to close all of the entrance ramp where traffic is coming onto the Queens-bound roadway and send them in detours way outside of the downtown area and the immediate vicinity to avoid, you know, having a clogged up local network for the people that have to use that area. So we'll try and send the regional traffic completely away from the area, and then try and improve the conditions for the local adjacent area. This will take several traffic enforcement agents. We've been working closely with PD to make sure that we have the number of agents that we need. We'll also have many pedestrian managers, realizing that this is during the summer months where people are out and about. So we need to manage the pedestrians and keep them safe, as well as keep the traffic moving. There'll be message boards all over the place. In addition, we are talking to our regional partners the New Jersey Transit and Turnpike Authority and Thruway Authority and Port Authority and MTA and so on, to try to encourage the public well in advance to just avoid these weekends altogether for this area. And on that weekend, encouraging them to use alternate routes. We'll also do an outreach to freight and try and work with them to avoid the area altogether. We'll also use the HOV configurations, the ones that we have in the AM hours, to direct more traffic towards the Battery Tunnel rather than coming into the Brooklyn Bridge and Manhattan Bridge area. So there's been a ton of planning that has gone into this to try to, minimize it to the extent feasible, understanding that any closures on BQE are obviously very disruptive to the neighborhood. So we're doing everything we can think of to encourage people to just stay away, use mass transit. This has worked in other areas where this was done and advertised very heavily. So that's what we will also be looking to do. And in addition to that will be all of these items that we talked about with the VMS signs and the agents. We're also working with the emergency services to make sure that we have some stationed locations where they're ready to go in case there is an emergency, so they're not trying to navigate through all of the traffic. We'll keep you posted as those conversations get a little bit more detailed. And then, of course, during the construction, overall, trying to manage the noise and so on, because it is pretty close to neighborhood. So we'll be working through that as well. So this will seem like a lot of detour conversations, and we'll certainly come back with much more detail and in a little bit slower pace. But this is to give you the overall flavor of what this looks like. So the section
I would just add
Staten Island,
we can share the deck after this meeting as well.
Thanks, Julie.
right. So the section of the roadway that's closed is from Tillery to Atlantic Avenue for Staten Island bound. And so the on-ramps at Sand and at Wine Street will be closed. And then at Columbia Street, that Staten Island bound roadway ramp will be converted to a 2-lane on-ramp so that most of the traffic that has bypassed this area can get back on quickly. And then the other traffic will be encouraged to use Hugh Carey Tunnel to the degree feasible. There will certainly be some local shifts that we'll have to do. There's a bus stop near Columbia Street that will be shifting. But the primary detour route that we will be encouraging people that have to be out and about will be 3rd Avenue. And if they came out more locally from either Manhattan Bridge or Brooklyn Bridge, they'll be encouraged to use the 4th Avenue. So our message to the world will be stay out of here. If you absolutely must, then use the 3rd and 4th Avenue where we will have heavy presence of TEA and others to make sure that the traffic keeps moving. Or just get off Brooklyn Bridge will be directed through Furman Street to get back on. So those will be the mapped detours, understanding that, of course, people who know the routes are going to try to use different routes, and we'll try and, keep that to the bare minimum and encourage people to use the marked detours. So this is just sort of a close-up of all of the on and off ramps that are closed. Again, when we come back closer to the construction, we'll really have more detailed information. And certainly different areas will need more details on different aspects. So this is sort of a high level of everything. So in order to make this Staten Island bound detour work, the Furman Street will be turned to going towards Brooklyn Bridge is going to be closed. It'll be 2 lanes going towards Atlantic so that we can move most of that traffic through. So that's one change that is going to be noticeable that helps us keep the traffic moving. And this is why we will have a lot of pedestrian managers in the area because of the people coming in and out of the park. And then there's a bunch of smaller turns that we have to modify to make sure that traffic keeps moving. And then for the, for the Queens-bound roadway, the closures are a little bit more extensive. The on-ramps are going to be closed further back to the south in order to reduce the amount of traffic that comes off at Atlantic, because anybody that's on that roadway at Atlantic has to get off. So we'll try and encourage people to get to the signed detour routes well in advance and not come all the way to Atlantic and then try to find their way around. So there will be some local street changes, knowing that some of the local traffic that comes off of these streets around here that have no option but to go through will need to be managed. So there will be some turns that will be limited, some parking that will be limited for the weekends to allow for some storage as turns have to be managed. We're also going to be limiting some turns. So, you know, there are certain left turns that tend to slow down everything. So we'll be managing around those kinds of things and try and, again, keep people on mapped routes, which if someone came all the way to Atlantic and that's where they get out, we'll have to get them through Borum to Tillery. But preferably, we will get them out of this area altogether, and they'll be coming along Third and then back on further down. And then again, there will be some that come from Prospect Expressway that we do have to manage through this area, and they would also be using the Borum to Tillery. So these are the two marked detour routes that we'll be managing. In addition, specifically for freight, and these are some of the ramps that we're closing, but for the freight, we are going to be encouraging them to use Linden Boulevard to go directly towards the airports, since, you know, at least some of them are headed that way, to try to keep them out of this area altogether. So that's one of the communications we'll be having with the freight industry. And then, of course, if we are sending people to either Battery Tunnel or to Manhattan Bridge, we need to make sure that that traffic is able to get off and continue moving in Manhattan. Otherwise, everything backs up back into Brooklyn. So we're also making some modifications on Manhattan side. And again, this is an area where we will have both TA and pedestrian management to make sure traffic taking Manhattan Bridge can get out. So people headed into Manhattan will be encouraged, if you're coming from the south, use the Battery Tunnel. If you're coming from the north, use the Manhattan Bridge and avoid this section of BQA. So where we are in this process is we're just about finished with all of the contractual documents. We're looking to go to advertisement shortly to bring a contractor on board. And then there's some, you know, paperwork and registration and all of that involved, which will finish out towards the end of this year. And that's when the contractor will have the notice to proceed to get started. And at that point, they have to give us an exact schedule of how they plan to proceed with this work. And as soon as we have that in the early 2023 is when we will be able to come out and give you more specifics of which weekends we anticipate doing these closures. And then they'll be held to, you know, meet that schedule. So again, the 3 weekends will be spread out over the construction season from March to October. Geralman Street Garage related work will occur throughout that year. However, the contractor wants to phase it. It doesn't really affect too many people there. And then, you know, obviously we have to keep in touch with you about the larger schedule, but we'll also have a specific community liaison who will have a, you know, a phone available 24/7 throughout the construction duration to quickly respond to any issues. The weekends that we do closures, we're going to have not only our people out there, we'll also have consultants who will be monitoring various areas and sharing that with our traffic management center that can give us directions if something needs to quickly change. And the contractor would also be able to implement those changes quickly if it's necessary. So there's a lot of that coordination that will be occurring during those weekends. And, you know, we'll identify who that point of contact is so that everybody can quickly reach someone if something comes up. So with that, I can take questions.
Tanvi, thanks. Karen, I know you posted a question in the chat. Tanvi, do you want to take that one first?
And I'll just read it, Tanvi, in case you can't see the chat. It says, it sounds good, but what are your plans to handle traffic if your encouragement just doesn't work? And Tanvi, I think you spoke a little bit to this in showing the detours, but can you talk a little bit more about the traffic calming measures to actually direct people towards the detours?
Yes. So we will definitely have well-marked signs. We're also going to be working with some of these app-based directions to try and, let them know that they should only send people to the marked detours and not all over the place. We'll also have the heavy presence of TA agents, so they will, redirect traffic if they are going down streets they shouldn't be going. We'll have them assisting. Plus, we'll work with PD so that we can quickly address if certain areas are really getting, unnecessary traffic. Then we may have to have PD really step up. So we're working on all of that. It is a concern for us as well, because we want to make sure that the local areas that are not supposed to have that kind of heavy traffic, we need to keep those areas safe and clear as well.
I think it'll be mission critical throughout this that we're really staying in touch with the community boards like you. So if we're hearing any concerns, that we're really addressing them in real time.
Yeah, and just since it's in the same vein, there was another question posted in the chat, which is, will there be any traffic calming measures in Carroll Gardens and Cobble Hill to prevent detours through local residential streets during closures, Hamilton and Smith, Clinton, Hicks, for example?
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
Hicks is a little trickier because so many people are used to being on Hicks. So up to Atlantic Avenue, there will be some level of people who end up on Hicks. So we have really looked at how to manage that traffic. But at some point, they cannot continue through because there isn't the capacity in the rest of the road. So we really do pay attention to that, which is why we're preventing certain turns. So where people want to turn that left into Hicks, we'll be preventing that and other ideas like that. And we're certainly paying attention to those smaller streets.
Okay. Jerry, you have your hand up, then I'll take Doug's question in the chat after you.
Okay. Tanvi, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
And my first is really a question about when you pick the weekends to do this work, have you consulted with the Port Authority as to when the Queen Mary 2 comes in and its docking arrangements? Sometimes they do come in on weekends. So just an added, if you haven't spoken to Kennard or whatever their name is right now, to look at their schedule for the QM2, that might be helpful, because you do get a lot of traffic coming down and a lot of private limousines and livery cabs and cabs coming and taking them people off and bringing them down in the later afternoon.
That's a great flag.
That's a good point. Yeah, we'll definitely follow up. And they probably get a lot of trucks as well because they probably refill.
And now
things in
I don't
there.
know,
Yeah.
I obviously, if the schedule has them during the week, that's lovely. But you can be sure that at one point they will come on the weekend, and without knowing it'll be the same weekend you do one of the closures. So let's try and avoid that. Currently, with the one lane closed in each direction on the cantilever, the traffic in the afternoons and on the weekends on Columbia Street and Hicks Street, Clinton Street, I'm sure I don't have to give you the whole litany, but it's all the way over to 4th Avenue, is really very serious. And so it's not just Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, it's Borum Hill. And I'm just hoping that your traffic management program and plan will encompass more than the immediate area, because a lot of people have learned how to use that Hamilton Avenue exit, either on the Prospect Expressway or at the end, right before making the turn to go into the trench. And they then could run through the neighborhood as much as possible, the neighborhoods, because it's going to be all three neighborhoods. It's not going to be just Carroll Gardens and Cobble Hill. It'll be across the border in CB2 in Brooklyn Heights. Some of my board members may shoot me for saying that. But realistically, so I think the placement of I know it's early, but the placement and the number of traffic agents and constant consultation with the local police precincts are going to be essential, and the fire department. Because just recently we had it was a false alarm, thank God, on Columbia Street, but it took the engine companies and ladder companies coming from Red Hook 15 minutes to get to the alarm on Columbia Street on a Saturday. So this part of it, as the public safety chair, I'm sort of concerned about that aspect and also the traffic through the community. So when do you estimate that we will be able to work with and see the traffic mitigation plan?
Thanks for all that feedback. It's really helpful to hear folks who know the on the ground. And I can tell you, and I know my parents drive to downtown Brooklyn on Sundays for religious services. And so I know that Hicks Street corridor gets really crowded. But I do just want to note first that the closures are between Saturday 2 a.m. and Monday 4 a.m. Obviously, we still have to think about Sunday, but do want to make clear that it's not the whole weekend.
Yes.
Because I know that sounds like a lot. I'll defer to Tanvi on when exactly we'll have the full schedule. And I think this is our initial proposal on mitigation strategies, and we're going to share the deck with you afterwards so you can really look at it in detail. But it really tries to outline where folks would be directed off of the expressway and onto specific detours. Tanvi, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's generally what we are looking to do. But I think speaking to people who are living in the area and have observed certain things will also help us fine tune some of this. And as I said before, we are already in touch with FDNY and EMT and others. So we will stage them closer. Because even with all of our outreach and whatever, it may become necessary that they want to get somewhere quickly. So for these weekends specifically, we will be staging them so that they can quickly get where they need to.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so we should be
okay.
coming out to you in a couple of months with the more updated plan. And Jerry, happy to keep following up with you specifically on the emergency services.
I hope so, because the local precinct in Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens was not sufficiently contacted when the closures went into effect for the 2 lanes, from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. And they were very surprised. So I just would like to make sure that everyone's aware of it. And one last point, Tanzi, you spoke about some elimination of some parking regulations and parking, not regulations, but where you might have to free up some curb space. We'll need to get that out to the community as quickly as possible before those weekends. I know it's early, but it's as you know, it's a very heavily residential area with lots of cars. That's a whole nother discussion. So
yes, definitely. Yeah, we'll be out there well in advance, sort of giving people heads up when these weekends are coming. And, we put out those signs at least a week in advance so people know that certain spots are going to be blocked and so on.
I would suggest that that you guys consider some on Clinton Street and Hicks Street and maybe Henry Street when you're going in the southbound direction. Some leafleting, even if it's only just on car windshields. But
that's a great idea.
That's it right now. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jerry, I'll just add that our Brooklyn office is on the line, and we'll make sure that they're connected to the precincts to make sure everyone's fully briefed.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm going to take Doug's question from the chat, Tanvi, which is, I was wondering if DOT might use these closures as a chance to do surveys and studies to find out what other methods or routes people use to get to their destinations. If they take other modes, for example, whether they forgo their trips altogether, etc. It could be informative as elected officials and others consider other future possibilities for the BQE.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, generally, there are certain ways where we're able to collect that kind of data. So we have ways of knowing, where people are going. But I think it makes sense for us to be specifically asking, hey, because of this closure, what are you doing? And try to proactively try to get the information. So I think that's a great suggestion. We'll definitely look to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. And as Tommy said in the presentation, we're really trying to encourage people not to drive their cars through this area during the construction and find alternate routes. So I think it's a good test study for folks to pilot their own new ways of getting around.
Sounds like excellent weekends to go on vacation if you've been planning something. So
I do just want to recognize though that not everyone will be able to avoid it. Some people do
Yes.
rely on their cars because of their abilities. So just want to, of course, say
and
that we
work
understand that
and
when that's
work and
necessary.
school or many other things that are unavoidable. Madeline, you have your hand up, and then I'll take Alex.
Yes, Eric, this has nothing to do with what I told you in the chat. This is something else. As the Department of Transportation, I'm sure, is well aware, I live in Red Hook. We have all these 3 last mile warehouses that have cropped up. By the time you're starting to do your reconstruction and all that other thing, the 3 that are, well, 2 are under construction and 1 is already functioning. There'll be a lot more truck traffic coming through this whole area. Are you aware of this? Because nobody seems to be, or at least they're not addressing it. So I want this on the record that something's got to be done. You're worried about the truck traffic on the BQE. We're just adding more to that right now.
Thanks for that great point. Obviously, I think a central point of this new BQE visioning plan is that we really want to be thinking about the full corridor. It was a real priority of the mayor to think about equity, not only from Atlantic to Sands, but also on the northern and southern end of the BQE. So really thinking about your lived experience in your community and how we can mitigate freight long-term. So I hope that you'll participate in the community sessions. Obviously, our freight folks are not on the phone. I'm happy to share my email in the chat and we can follow up with you so that we can really address the issue.
And just to piggyback, Madeline had sent me a direct message in the chat, and her question was, what about the street closures we have over the summer for block parties on weekends? Columbia Street usually has a big block party, and then there's the Atlantic Antic toward the end of the summer. I assume that you guys are working closely in contact with the operators of those events, and will look at block party applications and the larger scope of the BQE work, but just wanted to
checked with the precincts for the block parties.
Yeah, huge fan of the Atlantic Antic. This was also flagged for me on the community board 2 call. We definitely are going to be working with the organizers.
Great. Alex?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Well, my one of several concerns is when you finish your project, will you restore it back to 3 lanes? And are you going to maintain the 80,000 gross weight limit is one question I have.
So I can start with the lane reduction and then Tanvi can jump in. As you probably know, we implemented this lane reduction in August 2021. DOT has observed a decrease in total crashes during that time, crashes with injuries and total injuries, as well as, substantially fewer crashes at the Atlantic Avenue ramps. We're closely monitoring changes to congestion on the highways as well as local streets and making adjustments where appropriate, including signal timing changes and restriping and curb regulations. So, we're really continuing to monitor that right now and would be happy to meet, to discuss our observations in further detail as that moves along. But, that decision is still pending.
Well, I live on Court Street and I see it's, terrible on Hicks and Clinton going up, and people are trying to go up through and to go through Tillery. The structure was open in 1956, and I was just wondering what has happened between now and then. I saw a lot of nice photos of work that I would consider could be done internally without disrupting traffic, rusting rebar and spalling of concrete. I mean, were these structures given the every 2-year bridge inspection? Is there Was there any flags being done?
You know, the BQE is the most monitored structure in the city. I'll let Tanvi get into the details on our Way in Motion program and the ongoing construction and repairs that we've been doing. But I do just want to assure you that we've been monitoring it constantly and do feel the structure is safe. Tanvi, can you speak a little to Way in Motion? Yeah.
Sure. To continue that thought in terms of inspection, so the state does inspect every bridge every 2 years. In addition to that, we walk through the whole area and monitor various locations on a quarterly basis or more, depending on what we see. In fact, the repairs that we are identifying and looking to do came out of those inspections. So the area in that Clark Street was actually flagged by a state inspection. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing this work. Because of the unique configuration of this structure, it's not easy to just do a repair. Most projects, this is definitely the most unique structure in the country. And so addressing conditions that come up here require us to, unfortunately, have to manage the traffic around it. We would love it if we could repair it without disrupting all of you, and we could work by just closing a lane like we normally do on all of our other bridges. It's just, unfortunately, this one, the way it's configured, cannot be handled in that same way. So we're trying to make it so that we condense the timeline, we work around, and then eventually come up with a repair or rehab or reconstruction, whatever it is we do, that answers the long-term question, and we're not doing this over and over again. So that's really where the long-term thinking is coming from. In terms of the 80,000 pounds weight limit, that is the legal limit in the state. It's legal, that's the limit everywhere in the state. So it's, you know, while we are extra sensitive on BQE, that is a limit that exists for all freight in the city. And we are looking to now automatically ticket violators starting early 2023. And the reason why we need to do it in that way, rather than just relying heavily on PD, is because there's very limited areas for a truck to be pulled over. We have no shoulders. There's nowhere for a truck to be pulled over and wait. This severely limits the ability of PD to ticket them. So although they've been trying since last 2 years, since 2019, they do these weekly violation blitzes, and they've violated a bunch of truckers in the area. It's difficult to do it on an ongoing daily basis. So with this legislation that was approved last year, we're going to be able to put something that's a first in the nation type of system that will catch violators every time they pass by. And hopefully that really reaches the 80,000 pounds more seriously, not just in this area, but across the board. And if this program is successful, we can roll it out in more areas in the city.
Well, I appreciate that, but I didn't hear you speak anything about maintenance. I mean, here we are, we know that it's a non-standard structure. It was opened in 1956. City DOT was going to do something in 2019, but all of a sudden they pulled the project away. I mean, I drive the road all the time and I use the train whenever I can, but my God, it certainly at a minimum could use a coat of paint, and that's being jokeful, but I'm talking about the spalding and the rusting rebar that could have been addressed that hasn't been addressed. It's, you know, I see you change your thing saying that it's, yes, we know it's a city-owned structure, but you're on an interstate. And, you know, there's a level of responsibility, and I'm just not that impressed by how the structure has been maintained.
Alex,
Let me
I think your point is well taken. I do want to move on to other questions, and I think
No one else is asking a question.
I have
And
a couple of
I can just say the structure is definitely safe. As Tanvi was saying during her presentation, ongoing work has been done as needed. We have a where and when contract that allows us to do any repairs that come up as necessary. I think some were just done recently this year, Tanvi, and we will continue to do that, Alex.
Street. Yeah, we did some work around Hick Street that we were, we could get to it without disrupting traffic. There's been repaving of the structure multiple times, just even in the time frame that I've been on the project. So there's a lot of things we can do. Some of the spalled areas are just very difficult to get to without shutting down traffic, and that's where we're really limited.
Can you share with us any of the weight recording data that you've been receiving with the loads, gross vehicle weights, please?
Sure. So it's actually available via open data through.
Just an idea, just something off the top of your head. I saw early reports saying vehicles in excess of 170,000 gross. And you have machines, what are they recording?
We are regularly recording well over 100,000-pound trucks. We've identified some of them, and we're looking, that's why we want to get this automated enforcement done sooner rather than later. There are a significant portion of people that are overweight.
Yeah. And Alex, as we said, we really are trying to prioritize these changes so that we can continue to maintain the structure as safe, which is obviously our #1 priority.
And Alex, if you have additional questions, please feel free to post them in the chat with your email address, and I'm sure DOT would be happy to respond directly to you.
Absolutely.
And CC the community board. Jerry, I'll get to you in a moment. I have a question in the Q&A from Thomas Briggs, which is, are you considering adding alternate modes of transit to help calm and reduce traffic? For example, more bike lanes or increased subway and bus service while the closures are happening?
That's a great question. I'm so glad to see that there. I think you probably maybe saw just last week that the mayor announced a number of new bus projects, including along Flatbush. We're really excited about that work. And obviously the city is constantly expanding its bike network. So, we really are trying to encourage folks to be moving in multiple ways throughout the city.
And
For
then
that weekend specifically, we will certainly talk to MTA and see if they have things that they could do. Unfortunately, buses may not help a whole lot if they're trying to go in the same traffic that everybody else is in. But certainly if we can do anything with the subway system or and things of that nature, we're already in touch with MTA. So we'll keep those conversations going.
thanks, Tanvi. And a question in the chat from Josh Fogel, is DOT still following the guidance of the BQE expert panel and their recommendations?
So, as I said at the top of the call, the mayor really took a hard look at everything that had been reviewed to date and decided that, we really don't want to needlessly spend time and money. We really want to get to work as soon as possible for a long-term fix for the BQE. So we really want to engage in that community planning process as soon as we can, really in the next couple of weeks, so that we can move forward expeditiously.
Great, thank you.
Which was actually one of the expert panel comments, right? Like they wanted the larger community conversation, which is exactly where we're headed. The other item they had identified was any urgent repairs that need to take place should happen as quickly as possible, which is what we're doing with these work that we're talking about that will occur next year. So a lot of the things that were brought up by expert panel are actually what we're following through on here is just the timeline. Instead of doing a stopgap repair and then taking on visioning, we think it just makes sense to go right into a real project so we don't have to do it twice.
Jerry?
Okay. Tanzi, first let me thank DOT for this presentation. It's very informative. We get some idea of what's happening versus where we've been for the last year or so, maybe a little longer, not knowing what's been going on, especially with the lane closures, and lanes were closed and we didn't hear anything for 18 months or so, I think it is, give or take. Anyway, in the presentation, if I'm not mistaken, when you're closing the southbound direction, you mentioned something about making the entrance at off at Atlantic Avenue, which is actually, I think you meant the one on Columbia Street, a 2-lane entrance. And my concern is, since that's a left-hand turn off Columbia Street, is the northbound traffic, one, on Columbia Street? And two, will you be reconstructing that entrance ramp in any way to really make it a two-lane entrance, even if it's temporary? Because you have a two-lane exit there going, it's the Atlantic Avenue exit, but it comes out on Columbia Street. But basically, the entrance lane is one lane, and it's very tight there because it goes right into the Congress Street Bridge. So will there be, under the Congress Street Bridge, I should say, will you be doing any reconstruction in preparation to that entrance area, which is right near?
Yes, that's a great observation. We will be doing work to that area as one of the preps to make sure that two lanes can actually turn, make it through that ramp and on. And since there'll be only one lane coming from Staten Island bound, they should have sort of a free flow condition to get into lane and continue on. To manage that turn, certainly we're going to need the agents to really help to make that left turn. And forgive me, I forgot to mention that about the Columbia Street, like that northbound direction. Off the top of my head, I can't recall if we are detouring them to Congress or we're letting them go through that intersection. We went through that back and forth multiple times on what's the doable version of it. And I just can't recall where we left off on it. But we did look at that if there are people coming down Columbia Street and we're sending all of this traffic, they're in opposing directions. So that is being addressed in the plans that we have. I just can't remember the exact way we addressed it.
That's understandable. And one other thing, as you know, I'm sure that with Van Voorhees Park right on the corner of Congress and Columbia, that is a heavy pedestrian crossing getting to Brooklyn Bridge Park. So with what you said, it will be interesting to see how you handle it, because you have a traffic light right there, and then you have one at the entrance, and the left-hand turn is going to be very, how do I say this, confrontational? Well, could be, may not be.
Yeah,
That's helpful
it'll be
feedback.
tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have the pedestrian managers in that area, well aware of the flow and what's happening, and try and make sure that we keep people channeled. As frustrating as it may be for people to wait at intersections, hopefully we can keep them moving so they don't have to wait too long.
Okay, thanks.
Another question from the chat from Daniel Wiley, who is liaison for Representative Nydia Velasquez. What about waterproofing joints so that salt that has accumulated over the years doesn't continue to flush throughout the structure during rains, contributing to corrosion?
Thanks so much for that question, Dan. I think the mayor really wants to move forward with a long-term fix for the structure now. That long-term fix would be inherently waterproofed because it would be new work. So we feel like we can move forward with that long-term fix, engaging in a community plan right now to move forward.
And from
And
Madeline.
just to add, just to clarify, just putting waterproofing membrane on an already compromised structure doesn't really work. So there isn't like a, simple solution to this. We would have to have addressed the underlying conditions, and then all of a sudden we're on this major effort just to get to that point. So which is why we're going directly to the longer term plan.
Thanks, Tanvi. And from Madeline Murphy, how about an express bus to Manhattan from Red Hook, Cobble Hill, and Carroll Gardens as a mitigation?
Thanks for that idea. We can certainly, talk to our partners about it.
It's been thought of for a number of years. It was on the books at one point and then
So put it back again.
disappeared.
So thank you, everyone. I think that's it for questions. We're grateful to the Department of Transportation for the update. Thank you to my colleagues and our guests for your insightful questions. Evan, thank you for running the tech aspect of this meeting. I as chair, I just ask that we keep the lines of communication as open as possible. As much advance notice to community board as you can give on closures and updates is super important in order for us to be able to help you get the word out to the community broadly, and really try to dissuade as many people as possible from trying to drive through the area when this work is being done. But thanks for the update, and we appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you all again before long.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. And I just want to note that I did share my email in the chat. And so very, very much welcome feedback from folks in an ongoing manner.
And as co-chair, I would like to echo what Eric said with one addition. This will have a tremendous effect on pedestrian public safety and public safety in general. So we need to keep both sides of this committee and the community aware a good deal ahead of time, and to continue to work with you guys on this so that it will be as painless as possible. Not painless, but as painless as possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. And I think this is barring any unexpected agenda items popping up. This is it for us through the summer, but we'll be back in September. And always encourage you to join us for these meetings.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take care, all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Eric. Have a good.
Thanks, guys.